I've been living in Japan for almost 24 years now. So I've been a permanent resident since 2009. I got my permanent residence in 2009 after 5 years married to a Japanese citizen. And I thought that was it. So with permanent residence, I'll be able to stay in Japan indefinitely, regardless of my work situation, regardless of my marital status. You know, as long as I don't commit a serious crime, I will be able to stay here and continue living here. But that might not be true for much longer. So this video is about the proposed changes to immigration law that the government is debating at the moment. I was asked to make this video by a comment by someone who watched one of our YouTube videos. Thank you very much for the comment. Thanks for watching. And yeah, please do comment, ask questions, because you may well come up with the next topic for our channel. But anyway, this proposed law, this proposed change to the immigration law. So currently, my understanding is that you can have your permanent residency revoked, but only if you're convicted of a serious crime and have to spend like a year or more in prison. And I think most people would find that reasonable. Now, what these new changes seem to be going for is to make it possible to revoke permanent residency for a far greater range of misbehavior, is how I might put it. So the range of offences is greatly expanded. So it's not just serious offences with jail time, it's a number of different offences. And also things that aren't offences, things that wouldn't land you in prison. Things like not paying tax, or not paying your nenkin, or not paying health insurance. And I have serious reservations about the kind of rhetoric around this issue, the kind of political discussion, the headlines it's generating, some of the examples the government's coming up with, and also the precedent. So the precedent that rather than having, you know, a consequence for these things. So if you don't pay your nenkin, there's a consequence, regardless of whether you're Japanese or non-Japanese, a permanent resident or someone else. You know, if society as a whole thinks that paying nenkin is very important, then we set up some kind of enforcement mechanism that applies to everybody. What I don't like is having this kind of special punishment that only applies to permanent residents, where you can lose your permanent residency for willful non-payment of nenkin and so on. The other thing I have reservations about is the scale of this issue. You know, just how widespread is non-payment of tax, non-payment of nenkin, non-payment of health insurance by permanent residents compared to the population at large. In the debates, we've seen government officials bring up figures like 10% of permanent residents are not paying, you know, either their tax or their nenkin or their health insurance. But looking at the figures, that 10% refers to 1,000 permanent residents who tried to sponsor family members to become permanent residents. And already this doesn't sound like a normal permanent resident who's, you know, living their life here. This sounds like someone who is trying to bring in relatives from abroad. And according to the data, 10% of those people were found not to be paying tax, nenkin, health insurance, and therefore had those applications denied. So rightfully so, they were not able to sponsor their family members to become permanent residents because they hadn't been paying their taxes, nenkin, health insurance, etc. Now, extrapolating that 10% from this very small subsection of people to the entire population of permanent residents, I think it's about 900,000 of us, is a bit of a stretch, in my opinion. So I would be curious to know just how many people are in that situation. But again, if non-payment of nenkin is an issue, now that we have the My Number system, it should be very easy to tell who's paying nenkin, who's not paying nenkin, then create more robust penalties. Create a more robust enforcement system that applies to everyone in Japan, and do that rather than going after permanent residents specifically in public And I think that's actually the thing here. It's not actually that permanent residents not paying their taxes or their Nenkin or their health insurance and so on, is that specifically is a big problem, but rather that the government is trying to make it easier for people to come to Japan, and those people may well become permanent residents, and therefore they want some kind of backdoor that allows them to get rid of people later on if they decide that they're not wanted or they're not contributing to society fully, and also to make it more politically palatable to make these other changes. So to appease the right wing in a way, to say, okay, we are going to have more people coming in, but we're going to treat them more strictly. And I can kind of understand the motivation there. But I really don't like the precedent. I mean, what's next? Are we going to have, people losing their permanent residency if they commit minor traffic offences? Sounds stupid, but that's the kind of precedent that we might be seeing as these powers are expanded. So what was a very limited ability to revoke permanent residency is really opening up much wider, and the conditions are very vague. So it sounds like it's going to be up to the discretion of the immigration authority and so on. And I'm always a bit dubious about that because they're not opaque, they're not really accountable, they don't really explain their decisions. So I think a lot of people could end up with life-changing consequences, because if you're a permanent resident, then your life is here. You've decided to stay here permanently. And to lose that on a technicality or because of a mistake or because, you didn't do your taxes properly, the wording of the law is willful negligence or willful non-payment, but yeah, I'm slightly worried, and this just pushes me further towards thinking that maybe naturalizing is the safest thing to do if you're planning to stay in Japan. But what do you think? Have you been following these new proposals? Do you have any thoughts on it? Do you agree? I mean, is it a good idea to crack down on permanent residents, make sure that they're actually contributing properly to society? And am I being foolish in being worried about the potential kind of expansion of this in the future? Let us know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching, and see you in the next video.